With a changing climate and advancing technology, the way we design and build in the Bahamas is evolving. Today, we're diving into the upcoming amendments to the Bahamas Building Code, changes that promise to strengthen resilience, improve efficiency, and redefine our construction standards. This is Raising Standards, the economic and social impact of the new Bahamas Building Code. Join us as we discuss what these updates mean for architects, engineers, and builders across our islands. Keep watching. A brand new episode of You and Your Money starts now.
You and Your Money is brought to you by
Integrated Building Services,
The Paint Place,
ARC Venture Limited,
Graphite Engineering,
and the Deposit Insurance Corporation.
Welcome to You and Your Money, everyone. Joining us today to talk about the economic impact of building code updates on construction and development are Sonia Brown from Graphite Engineering Limited and Nick Dean from Integrated Building Services. Sonia and Nick, welcome to the show.
Hi, good to be here.
Now, Nick, what role did your firm play in terms of the consulting as relates to these building code updates, and what economic factors were considered?
Well, my firm was co-partner in the consultancy, Integrated Building Services, and Mott MacDonald from the UK. And the role we served was to provide commentary and recommendations for the upgrade of the building code. So that involved preparing the framework for how we went about gathering information for how to recommend the changes to the code. That included defining the groups that were going to be invited for input. So we cast a wider net at first. We had town hall meetings, general public was invited, and then we did focus group with key stakeholders such as government case stakeholders, contractors, architects, engineers, etc. And we also examined other similar codes. So International Building Code, codes from the Caribbean, etc., etc. So we pulled from all those different sources information that would be relevant to us. And then we also did an internal review of the various sectors of the code that would be affected. And one of our primary charges was to make sure we built in some resiliency to the impacts from climate change. So a lot of the economic impacts that we are faced as a country, due to the fact that we are a low-lying country, we are very heavily impacted by sea level rise. So the economic considerations needed to include how we were going to make our buildings and the built environment more resilient in the face of those impacts.
Now, Sonia, how do you expect the updated code requirements to impact project costs for clients?
Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the ministry for undertaking this effort, because it has been 21 years since the code was updated. And so we should be on a path where from now on we update the code more regularly. But in terms of the cost, there will be cost implications if you are looking to improve climate resilience, definitely, because you're going to have to build more robustly. You're also going to look at sustainability. But we have to look at costs from two different perspectives. There's the upfront costs that is incurred if you build properly, and then there is the ongoing cost. So if you build your building for climate resilience and sustainability, you would expect your operational costs to go down, and any costs for maintenance and repair, those should be subdued as well. However, if you fail to adhere to the climate change policies and regulations around the building code, what may happen is when you have hurricanes or even severe weather events like storms or massive flooding, your costs for repairs may be astronomical. So it's not sufficient to just look at the initial capital outlay. And of course, you can do things to reduce your initial capital outlay. For example, looking at the size of the structure that you're constructing. So it's not a straightforward question. You know, there are several areas that need to be considered when we look at cost.
Well, absolutely. Thank you for that. Now, Nick, in your view, will these new standards require additional resources for construction firms, and how might that affect project timelines and budgets?
I think construction firms that are currently building to best practices and properly adhering to the stipulations in the current building code, their impacts will not be as great. You know, there are certain standards that they should be building towards anyway, and those will pretty much be followed with the upgrades in the new code. A lot of what will probably be impacted is, say, those areas most subject to storm surge and sea level rise, primarily near the coastline. But one of the ways to mitigate those costs is avoidance. So there probably should be some no-build zones. So if some place is subject to major flooding and impact from damage due to storm surge, it's probably a good idea just not to build in that location and do a proper site study to understand, you know, what the potential impacts of certain areas are. So I think there may be some marginal increases if there are minor increases in, say, the quantity of materials used or the type of materials used. I don't think they will be very impactful, like I said, if those companies are already building to best practices and internationally recognized standards.
Definitely. Now, Sonia, do you think these changes will increase the need for advanced skills in the industry, potentially raising labor costs?
What I've observed anecdotally, there seems to be a deficit generally in our labor force. We see on construction sites a lot of immigrant labor. And so if companies believe that they need to bring people in to support, I think that's an indicator. But when we look at the skill set, I think we are challenged by having the basic skill set. And so as an industry professional, I question, are we doing enough to encourage the school leavers to consider careers in the construction industry? Are we doing enough? But yes, some of the new technology will require a bit more sophisticated skill sets, but it's not anything that we are incapable of doing. And so there's a broad spectrum of opportunities available. So I think I'd like to frame it as it's an opportunity for us to really learn more about construction, have more people engaged in the construction industry, and see how we can just raise the standard generally.
Now, is there a particular place where if there's somebody that's interested in being a part of the construction industry, what would you recommend would be their first set of steps to get themselves started?
Well, if they're interested, we always, I'm an engineer, so I'm biased towards the Bahamas Society of Engineers. So I always encourage persons to join. You can join as a student member. You don't have to have an engineering degree to join. And my firm and many other private firms, and I believe the Ministry of Works offers internships for students who are interested in the design side of the business. But I believe that the contractors, from what I've seen, they also offer internships as well. So the Bahamas Society of Engineers is a good place to start in terms of getting the information. And I get cold emails and calls from students all the time, and I, do my best to provide guidance. But yeah, that would be the best place to start.
All right, thank you for that. Nick, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Just that people shouldn't be intimidated by the fact that the code is changing. The change, like Sonia said, is long in coming. 21 years is much too long. We need to have the benefit of learning from past experience. We have had a lot of time to learn different things about how materials react, what kind of vulnerabilities we have, and a lot of that will be incorporated into the new code. And I would encourage people to familiarize themselves with the code once it becomes available. Ask questions. The Ministry of Works, of course, will make themselves available. And I think there's a grow-in period to kind of educate people on the new sections of the code, just to make sure there's a wide uptake and understanding of the code. So I would say welcome the code, don't be intimidated by it, and familiarize yourself with it.
All right. Well, Sonia, thank you for joining me on the show today. And Nick, we have to take a quick break. And when we return, we're going to look at preparing for new standards, practical and structural implications of building code updates. This is You and Your Money. We'll be right back.
Hi, Kevin. How can I help you?
Is it true this institution isn't doing too well? Should I move my money since I have a business and personal savings account?
Don't worry about the gossip. Banks are regulated, so the chances of this institution failing is slim, and your deposit accounts are protected. We are members of the Deposit Insurance Corporation, so your deposits are protected up to a maximum of $50,000.
What if I have more? My business account has a little over $100,000 in it. Will I get my remaining funds if the bank fails?
Yes, through the process of liquidation, which is when the bank's assets are sold over time to repay its creditors, like yourself.
Well, I learned something new today.
My advice is to diversify your financial portfolio across different account types, different member banks, and credit unions. Help us to protect you by protecting yourself.
To learn more, visit our website dic.bs for more information.
In the Bahamas, island time is real. The history of 𝗪𝗓𝗧𝗛 Lumber Company, established in 1945, is etched into the fabric of this proud island nation. It's a story that deserves to be celebrated in full color, and that's where we come in. 𝗪𝗓𝗧𝗛, the paint place, has been bringing color and vitality to homes and businesses across the Bahamas. Here, color is more than just a hue, it's a symbol of life. Together, we can paint a brighter future.
The 2024 Long Island Business Outlook.
As someone who was born and raised here, I am very, very excited for the new growth opportunities that are coming to the island, and hopefully many of us who haven't been able to thus far can return home.
Find out about groundbreaking and current projects and how you will benefit. Connect with business leaders and influencers and move your business forward. Register now, tclevents.com. Secure your spot today.
Welcome back to You and Your Money, everyone. In this segment, we'll continue our conversation with Mr. Nick Dean from Integrated Building Services and Mr. Craig Delancy from the Ministry of Works. Now, we'll be discussing preparing for new standards, practical and structural implications of building code updates. Now, Craig, what are some of the major changes in the building code, and how is the Building Control Department preparing to implement these new standards?
Well, the building code will be totally revamped. It will be restructured under the International Building Code. We're using that as our base because the International Building Code covers a wide range of subject matter concerning construction and the industry. It will also be laid out by information on each subject, whereby it would be easier to read and be able to look up the various references in the code. The code will also include for performance-based standards, not only just the prescriptive methods that are in the current building code. And so that would give architects and engineers the opportunity to be able to be more flexible in their designs and at the same time meeting the minimum code standards. The new code will also include for energy efficiency in buildings, and that would include residential and commercial buildings. It's important that we try to look at our carbon footprint and energy efficiency standards nowadays, which is taking place throughout the world, where everyone is trying to conserve energy and to have alternate energy in their designs. We would also be including for accessibility, improving the standards that we currently have in the building code. And the accessibility standards would be geared towards persons who are physically immobile, as well as the deaf and the hearing impaired and the blind. And so we intend to have more detailed information in the code pertaining to accessibility. There's also sustainability measures that would also be intertwined throughout the code. There's also a portion of the code that would involve for coastal infrastructure guidance, it's called. It will be an addition to the code, which would assist persons dealing with mitigating against hurricanes and other flood issues, especially coastal areas. So those are some of the major changes or features that would be involved in the new building code.
Now, Craig, with the introduction of the independent inspectors, how will the inspection process change, and what benefits do you foresee for developers as well as contractors?
Well, with the introduction of the independent inspectors, that would help developers a long way in the sense of giving them the flexibility either to engage the Ministry of Works inspectors, or they can engage the private sector who would be responsible to carry out the inspections based on the Building Regulation Act. Now, the details are still being worked out with that, but with the independent inspectors, they would require to have liability insurances. They have to be also registered professionals who would take responsibility for the inspections on that job. They would also have to report to the Buildings Control Division their reports on and sign off on those inspections. So persons or developers who's trying to fast track a project, that's where the independent inspectors can come in, because they can work on weekends or after hours in carrying out inspections. And those have to be recorded and logged so that at the end of the day, when it's time for the occupancy to be issued, we would have adequate, genuine information on what has taken place on that site.
Now, Nick, from an engineering perspective, do you think the new standards will enhance the resilience of the buildings to withstand the climate impacts?
I think they will. Like I said, I think as long as best practices are being followed now, the new changes in the code will improve it, but they won't be dramatically different. So I think the important thing is people need to take a deep dive and familiarize themselves with the code and make an effort to understand the new provisions. And if they don't understand them quite right away, they can always reach out to the Ministry of Works. You know, Craig's team is going to be doing an effort to kind of familiarize and educate people on the new provisions of the code and how to properly implement the code into the construction industry.
Now, on that note, Craig, is there any timeline as to when that educational component is going to be undertaken?
Well, for the new building code, we are still working on the draft, which will then be given out to the public for their review and feedback. We hope that we would be able to have that final draft by the end of third quarter in 2025. Now, with that draft, along with that, we would have to have sessions on becoming familiar with the building code, the new building code, training sessions for inspectors and local architects and engineers and those persons in the industry. There's also certification courses that would be available through the International Code Council, who is responsible for the International Building Code, which, as I said earlier, we'll be using as our base. And so persons would have to become more familiar with the code, and it's not an overnight process. It would take several months for persons to become familiar. Then it will be up to the minister to decide the date that the new code will be enforced. So that would be at least another 6 months from that point. You have to give persons and the general public time to become familiar with what they're moving into next. I would also like to thank all the stakeholders who participated so far with the revisions to the building code, including the local architects, engineers, contractors, Ministry of Work staff, and the consultants who have been assisting us along the way.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Nick and Craig. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have to take another break, and when we come back, we'll discuss community resilience, preparing for stronger storms and changing weather patterns. This is You and Your Money. We'll be right back.
In the Bahamas, island time is real. The history of 𝗪𝗜𝗧𝗛𝗪 Lumber Company, established in 1945, is etched into the fabric of this proud island nation. It's a story that deserves to be celebrated in full color, and that's where we come in. 𝗪𝗓𝗧, the paint place, has been bringing color and vitality to homes and businesses across the Bahamas. Here, color is more than just a hue, it's a symbol of life. Together, we can paint a brighter future.
The 2024 Long Island Business Outlook.
As someone who was born and raised here, I am very, very excited for the new growth opportunities that are coming to the island, and hopefully many of us who haven't been able to thus far can return home.
Find out about groundbreaking and current projects and how you will benefit. Connect with business leaders and influencers and move your business forward. Register now, 𝗖𝗎𝗓𝗪𝗧.com. Secure your spot today.
Welcome back to You and Your Money. Mr. Brent Creary from 𝗗𝗥 Venture Limited is here with us. In the previous segments, we spoke about the economic impact of building code updates on construction and development, and preparing for new standards, practical and structural implications of building code updates. In this segment, I want us to talk about embracing innovation, architectural impacts, and sustainability in the new building code. Now, Brent, from your experience, what are some key areas where building codes typically impact architectural design and planning, especially in a climate-sensitive region like the Bahamas?
Well, thank you for having me. So the building code impacts design from start to finish. It speaks to how we design for this environment, how we protect the users of those structures and buildings in terms of protecting it from storms, from wind forces. We have to consider all of these things, the efficiency of the building, the use of the building, how people are made safe while they're using and living in those buildings. So it affects us from start to finish. And if we do our jobs well, we produce meaningful structures and usable structures that are equipped to handle the changes that climate change are going to cause. The devil's in the details. And once we look at the details in a realistic and meaningful way, we can achieve some good design. And the benefits of that is to the user, whether it's the owner or someone who's occupying that building.
Now, Brent, with the potential introduction of guidelines for solar installations and energy efficiency, how will architects need to adapt their designs to meet these new requirements?
These new requirements come with a whole set of design challenges and solutions that we have to now take on. The client normally comes with their own requirements for size and use of building, the rooms that they need, the purpose of the building, and even the aesthetics of the building. So our job is now to bring together those two needs. And how we do that requires us to change our way of thinking. The traditional method of designing will have to change to respond to these new guidelines and new regulations. The introduction of solar systems, efficiencies of the building, all require a new approach or additional thinking. We oftentimes don't have to consider on smaller projects the efficiency of the building in terms of how it maintains its temperature, how it gets rid of heat or prevents heat gain. Those things are going to have to be thought of on a consistent basis across many projects. So it requires us to put more concerted effort and increase the time we are designing. And that obviously increased timelines have effect on our fees. That's one of the effects of what is being proposed, but it gives us an opportunity to change the way we're thinking. Think of new material selections, think of new ways of doing things. In fact, it may also allow us to go back to some traditional methods of designing. Grammy's house wasn't on stilts for no reason. So changing the way we think about things gives us opportunities to explore new materials, more economic materials, environmentally friendly materials, alternate sources of materials. So we have opportunities here that we can utilize to achieve these new requirements. More design time requires more fees associated with it. But in the grander schemes of things, if you make a more efficient building, then we reduce that cost to the user, to the owner, in terms of it takes less energy, use of water, etc. And if it survives longer over the course of a generation or two, then the user benefits physically from those changes and those advantages.
Well, Brent Creary, thank you for joining me on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me.
As we look towards the future of building in the Bahamas, it's clear that these changes to the building code are about more than just regulations. They're about resilience, innovation, and safety. The adjustments we make today will shape our communities for generations to come, ensuring that they stand strong against whatever challenges lie ahead. Thank you for joining us on this journey of transformation. Let's continue to build a better, stronger Bahamas together. Here are dollars and cents snapshots from this week's show. Number 1, build to last. Investing in up-to-date building standards can save money in the long run by reducing damage costs from extreme weather. Number 2, stay informed. Understanding the upcoming building code changes ensures your projects meet compliance and avoid costly delays. Number 3, efficiency pays off. Embracing energy-efficient guidelines in construction can lead to lower utility costs and increased property value. That's it for today's show. Don't forget to follow You and Your Money on Facebook and tune in next week for a brand new episode. I'm Ria Christina. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
You and Your Money was brought to you by
Integrated Building Services,
The Paint Place,
ARC Venture Limited,
Graphite Engineering, and the Deposit Insurance Corporation.